Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to introduce lists. Now, what is a list? A list is a kind of variable that can store more than one data value. Right? In the previous lesson, we discussed variables that only discuss one value at a time that you can update. A list stores more than one variable, or is capable of storing more than one. So, for example, you may need a list that stores all of your daily grades or all of your major grades, or you may want a list that stores all of the names of all of your classmates. Okay? Or you may need a list that stores the amount of rainfall we've had each day of the current month, so on and so forth. For this video, we're going to use a list that stores all the items we intend to buy at the grocery store. So basically a grocery list. So to create that list, I'm going to go to the variable section and I'm going to select the make a list button. The same way we select make a variable to create a variable, we're going to select make a list to create a list. I'm going to name this list simply grocery list. And it'll be for all sprites. Usually every list we create will be for all sprites. Then I'll select OK. And then you see by default, the list will be displayed on the canvas. Of course, if I want to, I could choose to not display it by clicking on the checkbox next to the word grocery list. But I want it to be displayed. Now notice right now it says empty. That's because right now the list does not have any value. We have not put anything in there yet. That's also why it says length 0. The length tells you how many items are in the list. And right now we have no items in the list currently, which is why it says length 0. So to add an item to the list, we use this add instruction. Okay. So what I'm going to do is when the green flag is clicked, I'm going to add a bunch of items. First, I'm going to add an apple and 2 grocery lists. There's a drop down, but right now, grocery list is the only list we have right now. So it's the only option. Next, I'm going to add an orange. I'm going to add milk. I'm going to add rice. I'm going to add baking soda. And I'm going to add, say, yogurt. Let's go ahead and add one more item here. As you can see, the default value is thing. We could also add numbers just for FYI, but obviously numbers wouldn't make sense for what we're doing. The last item we're going to add, simply bread. All right, so when I click on the green flag, each of those items get added to the list. Okay. All right. I can scroll down to see each item in the list, and they get added in the order that I listed them in. Okay. So notice next to each value, there's a number next to it. That number tells you the position of the item. Okay, so as you can see, the numbering starts at 1. So apple is at position 1, orange is at position 2, milk is at position 3, rice is at position 4, baking soda at position 5, yogurt at position 6, bread at position 7. And right now, the length is 7 because that's how many items are currently in the list. There are 7 items in the list. Okay. Now, let's demonstrate some of these other features, these other actions we have. To do that, I'm going to use another event. I'm going to use the when space key is pressed. But in fact, before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the green flag again, and I want you to notice something. Right now, the length is 7. I click on the green flag. Now the length is 14. Why is that? Because the 7 items I added before got added a second time to the list. See, what you were probably expecting is that when I click on the green flag, the list would reset and then add those items again. But it doesn't do that. Every time I click on the green flag, it just keeps adding those same 7 items. It never resets back to its original state. Now, sometimes in some applications, you may want that. That might be what you want. But most applications, you're going to want your list to reset each time your program resets or restarts. So to do that, we're going to take the delete all command. The delete all of grocery list means remove every item in the list. And we want that to be the first instruction under when green flag is clicked. Okay? That way, every time we click on the green flag, before it adds anything, it removes everything currently in the list, then adds those 7 items. So now, when I click on the green flag, length is 7. No matter how many times I click on the green flag, the length is 7 because it always empties the list first before adding those 7 items. Now, delete. What does this delete feature mean? Right now it says delete 1 of grocery list. That means delete the value at position 1 of grocery list, which at the moment is Apple. So if I press the space bar, Apple, it gets removed from the list because that was the item at position 1. And now orange is at position 1. So if I press space again, orange gets removed. And notice how every time I remove an item, every item that was after it gets moved up. So if I say delete 3 of grocery list, that means baking soda, which is the item that's currently at position 3, will get removed, and yogurt and bread, which came after, they're going to move up 1. So let's demonstrate that. I press space. Baking soda is gone, and now yogurt is in position 3, and bread is in position 4. Okay. All right, now let's start over. Let's click on the green flag. Start again. Next, we have the insert thing at 1 of grocery list. So what this means is, let's say I said, for example, I say let's insert eggs at 4. Okay. Now, right now, the item at position 4 is rice. Okay. If I say insert eggs at 4 of grocery list, that's going to take everything that's currently at position 4, and afterwards, they're going to drop down to 1 spot. So rice is going to move to 5, baking soda will move to 6, yogurt will move to 7, and bread will move to 8, and that'll create room to insert eggs at 4. So let's do that. I press space, and as you can see, eggs gets put at position 4, and then everything else dropped it down 1 spot, and the length became 8. Likewise, or similarly, we have the replace command. Unlike insert, replace does not create room for a new item. Rather, it actually replaces the item that was originally there with a new value. So if I say replace, let's say 2 with cake, all right, that means the item that's currently at position 2, which is orange, that's going to be removed. It's going to be taken out and replaced with the value cake. So that means, so when I press space, that's what happens. Now cake is at position 2, and orange is gone. And notice the length did not change. It was 8 before the replace, and it was 8 afterwards, because again, we did not add cake to the list. We replaced the value, okay, with cake. All right. Okay. Next, we have an instruction that simply says item 1 of grocery list. So this means tell me what is the value at position 1 of grocery list. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to use the say command. Remember, we learned about the say command back when we were going over the look section, where the say command produces a quote bubble and speaks what you tell it to say. In this case, I wanted to say the value at item or position 1 of grocery list. So if it works correctly, it should say apple, because that's the value at position 1 of grocery list. So I'm going to take this, place it inside here, so that when I press space, it says item 1 of grocery list. And as you can see, it says apple. Okay. If I say item 4, I press space, and it says eggs, because that's the value at position 4 of grocery list. Okay. So that's what the item instruction does. Then next we have item number of thing in grocery list. Now, what does this do? Let's say I want to know what is position of rice in the list. Is it at position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8? Well, what I'm going to say is item number of rice in grocery list, and this will produce what number it is, assuming rice is in the list. So when I press space, it says 5, because that's the position rice is at. If I say item number of cake, when I press space, now it says 2, because that's the position of the cake value in the list. Now let's say I say a value that's not in the list, like say jeans. Say item number of jeans in grocery list. When I press space, It says zero. Zero, when you see the number zero, that's the sprite telling you that that item, that value is not in the list. Jeans is not in the list. Because if it was, we would have gotten a number that's one or greater. The fact that we got zero means that it can't be in the list. Okay. Next. Now, as you said before, the length of a list simply tells us how many items is in the list. So if I were to use this length instruction, length of grocery list, this instruction will simply return the number of values currently in the list. And right now it's 8. So if I press space, that's what the sprite will speak. It'll speak 8 because that's the number of values in the list. That is the length of the grocery list. Now suppose I simply want to determine if a certain value is in the list or not. For example, suppose I want to determine, let's put this right here. Suppose I want to determine if grocery list contains the value apple. Okay? If it does, then this instruction will produce true. It'll return true. If it does not, it'll return false. And whatever it returns, we're going to speak it using the say command. So let's do that. I press space, and it says true because apple actually is in the list. Likewise, if I type rice, and I press space, once again, it still says true because rice is in the list. However, if I type jeans, I press space, now it's saying false because jeans is not in this list. Okay? So whenever you see a question mark, you know that you're being asked a true or false question, either true or false. Okay. And then the show list and hide list commands work the same way. The same way you can show and hide a sprite or show and hide a variable. These commands are just when you want to control when and where a list should be displayed. Okay, when you want it to be hidden. Okay. Now let's go ahead and press the green flag to start over. Now a common thing that programmers do is they'll usually want when working with lists, often they'll want a certain action to be done on every single item in the list. Okay. Very rare is it that you'll do an action on just one or two items in the list. Usually, what you do to one item, you'll do to every item in the list. So, for example, suppose I want the cat sprite to say, using the say command. I want it to say each item in the list for 2 seconds. Okay. Now, the long and tedious way to do that would be to say, hey, say item 1 of grocery list. Okay. Then I'll duplicate. Okay. Then I'll say item 2. Okay. Right click, duplicate, say item 3, so on and so forth. That's the tedious way to do that. Okay. And that's tedious. Even for only 7 items, that's tedious. What if I had a list that had 100 items in it? Imagine having 100 say commands just so you could speak every item in the list. The more items you have, the more tedious this task becomes. Rather than have a say command, an individual say command for every item in the list, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the control section and I'm going to use the repeat command. What this repeat block means is any instruction let's say right now this is repeat 10. Any instruction I put inside this repeat block is going to get done 10 times. Okay, and I can change this number. I can change it to 15. I can change it to 25, so on and so forth. If I leave it at 25, then any instruction I put inside here will be repeated 25 times. Okay, so now as far as what number we put in here, I'll get to that in a second. But for now, what do I want done repeatedly? I want to use the say command repeatedly. Okay, so here I'm going to say. Right now I'm going to leave it at hello for now. And we're going to say hello for just 2 seconds. 2 seconds is fine. So that's the action that's going to get repeated. Next, I want to know how many times do I want this action repeated? Well, it depends on how many items are on your list, okay? Which can vary. If the list has 10 items, then I want it repeated 10 items. If the list has 20 items, then I want it repeated 20 times. If the list has 30 items, then I want the instruction repeated 30 times. So instead of putting an actual number, what I'm going to put is I'm going to put length of grocery list, so that whatever number of items is currently in the list, that's how many times this instruction will get executed. Okay. Now, next, what do we want it to say? Okay. I know I wanted to say, first I wanted to say item 1, then item 2, item 3, so on and so forth. So there are several steps to this, to do that. If I simply put item 1 of grocery list, right now that value is Apple. What this code will do is it'll simply say item 1 7 times. Okay. We don't want it to say the exact same item. We want it to first say item 1, then item 2, then item 3, then item 4, so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is, so I can have a number that's increasing, I'm going to come to my variable section. I'm going to make a new variable, or I'm going to call it, and this variable is going to act as a counter. Since we're using it to count up from 1 to a number, it's going to act as a counter, and I'm simply going to call it X. Okay. Now the name isn't important, but X will be fine for our purposes. What we're going to do is, before we begin this repeat process, we're going to set X. We're going to say set X to 1, because that's the position of the first value in the list. Okay. So at the very start, we're going to set X to 1. Then inside the repeat process, we're going to say item X of grocery list for 2 seconds. Okay. So again, right now X is set to 1. Then we say item X for 2 seconds. Right now it's still going to repeat the same value 7 times. So to make sure it's increasing, the next command I'm going to do is I'm going to use the change command. Okay. I'm going to say change X by 1. So after it says item X of grocery list, X will increase by 1, so that now X equals 2. Say item 2, then increase X by 1, now X equals 3, so on and so forth. And it repeats that. Okay. So let's put this in our script. Let's run it. Okay. I click on the green flag. First it says apple, then orange, then milk, then rice, then baking soda, then yogurt, then bread. All right. So whenever we bring this out, so whenever you have an action that you want done repeatedly, have a counter, give it whatever name you feel most appropriate, and start it at 1. Then in the repeat block, say how many times do you want this instruction to repeat? You want it to repeat as many items as are in the list. As many items as there are in the list, that's how many times you'll want the instruction to repeat, to make sure that that action gets done on every single item. Then inside this block, you're going to use that variable, that counter variable you created, as the position. Okay. That way, and then after you use it, increase it by 1, so that after your action gets executed on item 1, it'll then get executed on item 2, then item 3, and item 4, so on and so forth. Okay. Once you do that, and if you don't want it done immediately after, you can even use the wait command. Okay. So here, just so the program doesn't take too long, I'll say the item for just 1 second, then wait 1 second. Okay. All right. So I click on the green flag, says apple, waits, says orange, then waits, says milk, waits, says rice, waits, says baking soda, waits, says yogurt, then waits, says bread, waits, then we're done. Okay. And that's all we have for today on list.